Good morning, everyone. My name is Rich Kovarovic. I'm an assistant librarian at Dutchess Community College. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is information literacy and artificial intelligence and our initial approach to instruction and how we're going to kind of just approach that as a starting point. So for some background on DCC and AI on an institutional level, where we're at now, it feels super disruptive, as I'm sure it does to a lot of folks here, super disruptive for libraries and higher education in general. And that we're feeling that for sure. That's rippling through the college and it has been for years. In terms of different perspectives, approaches, allowances of AI usage, it's kind of all over the place. Certain faculty and staff are adamantly against it, very opposed to it. Others are becoming a little bit more accepting of integrating it into class assignments, which is interesting. We have an institutional learning outcome that addresses information literacy, and AI is such a part of that at this point. Like I'm going to emphasize a couple times today that AI literacy falls under the information literacy umbrella. So there is a need, I feel, for the library to be proactive about that, um, and just be proactive about addressing that, especially to incoming learners. Where we're at now, the library, we do not have an AI specific in-person class offering at this point. Um, we don't have an online class offering at this point either from the library. We've had requests to address it in our in-person InfoLit classes, or it has come up organically as part of the classes, which is always really interesting to me. Some examples of that is we do a visual arts intro seminar class. So incoming students in our visual arts program have to take an introductory seminar. We'll introduce them to the physical space of the library and the collections. And there had been instances a few semesters ago of instructors wanting those students to learn a little bit more about generative AI, the creative process, arts, and their feelings surrounding that. We do English 101 gateway classes here at Dutchess. And for those classes, they often get library instruction. Certain English 101s are often focused on a particular track as well. So for STEM students, there may be an English 101 course for them. And for visual arts students, there's an English 101 course as well. And really interesting are those students often have really strong feelings around generative AI, image creation, and kind of creative process. So it's come up organically in that class for several semesters now. I work closely with that instructor, and AI and art is just this recurring topic, either of discussion or research. And it's always, again, very interesting to see those students' perspectives on this. We also do a fact-checking class focused on misinformation and disinformation, and it's a very hands-on workshop. And AI has come up at the end of that as well. And that is one of those instances where we go through this whole process and students are learning how to fact check online information. And then kind of at the end, students may say, well, what about AI? What do you think about AI? And that's where the title of this presentation came from, actually, is students, one student recently wanted to know, what do you think about AI? And it's amazing that they're making those connections, that they're thinking about the stuff that they're learning to evaluate online information and how this might apply to generative AI. But it's also difficult to get into such a big topic when you have 5 or 10 minutes left in class. Like it feels like it deserves its own space to focus on. I've had a lot of conversations with our director, Ann Deutsch, about how AI and information literacy in the library kind of fit together and what we should be doing, particularly for young incoming students and learners, very young folks that are maybe growing up alongside of this now, which is a really important consideration with generative AI often being conflated with traditional search engines, and it's all getting very mixed up. I've also, for a couple semesters, been working with a SUNY librarians information literacy working group, like a subgroup, subcommittee, and they're focused on advancing AI literacy. And I think that that has been a fascinating process because we've been looking at different AI literacy models, different frameworks that K through 12, higher ed, libraries across the country have developed to address AI literacy. So we've looked at those. We've kind of developed SLOs that really align with SUNY's GE changes, which I'll get into in a moment. And now we're moving on to kind of recommendations across the SUNY system for how we could address these changes, um, and develop kind of like a sandbox for activities focused on AI instruction as well that will be available to anybody when the time comes. It's just not published yet. And I think that's really been interesting because it's given me an opportunity to see what other people are thinking about across the state, what they're doing already at the SUNY libraries, what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do, uh, what they think we should be doing. And it's fascinating, but it's also helped kind of frame where we're at a community college level for me. I've mentioned a couple times the SUNY GE changes to the SUNY General Education Framework, and these are taking effect fall 2026. What is in bold? I've put in bold because I think it's really important to highlight that these are still the same components of information literacy. These aspects haven't changed, but the underlined portions are the updates that they've added. So you still have the locate information effectively, evaluate information, and have a real understanding of the ethical dimensions surrounding information, dissemination, use, creation, and all of that. And what they've added, it touches on AI and includes AI, but again, just to emphasize that AI is not consuming this. It is not taking over information literacy for me. It is a component of it. So you are evaluating information from a variety of sources, including they've added origin. So looking at AI as a potential source of information that you have to evaluate. And then the ethical dimensions are kind of this huge piece of it. And now you could see whether from traditional sources or those emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence. And these components of the framework, I think, have kind of been guiding us for the SUNY Law Working Group, and they've kind of guided my thought process for how we can approach AI and instruction to start at the Ritz Library. So how we're going to start is a critical introductory module created in our Brightspace LMS. It will be added to our existing suite of library modules. And what that looks like is we have a Ritz Library Orientation module, and this is more for the introductory seminar students, students that are new to college, new to the library. And it gives them a real sense of the library as a space and a place, the physical collections, the human resources, and that kind of thing. It introduces them to some light information literacy concepts, but it is not super in depth because they're often not doing a research project for this class. Kind of building on that is the Introduction to Academic Research module, and this gets into the process of research, more intense information literacy concepts, and it kind of guides them through a research question, a research process, a research paper, and it's often a complement to in-person instruction, but it can also be a standalone module as well. And last is the fact-checking module. This came to us from our library director, Ann Deutsch, and it's a modified SIFT method, which also is kind of like an online version of the in-person workshop. All of these include text instruction, videos, like YouTube videos to kind of supplement the concepts, tutorials that we've created that walk them through searching certain library databases or Ritz Discovery Service. Quizzes, discussion posts, and for the fact checking, there's an interactive LibWizard tutorial as well. So we want to add this module to this existing suite and roll it out in fall 2026. And I feel like it will be a strong complement to the Ritz Library fact checking module. And in terms of what it looks like, I'm going to keep saying critical, and this critical information literacy approach is just going to be a piece of it. Like, I don't want it to be super theoretical, but I feel like this is a good way to address the ethical issues and allow students to make meaningful connections between AI usage and impact and their own values and ethics, and allow them to think about this on a bigger level. So super important to me is really to think about the socio-political dimensions and the systems of power. And I really like the Gregory and Higgins quote because it does talk about the political, economic, and the corporate systems that have power and influence over information production, dissemination, access, and consumption. And I think this is a really important thing to address, is that political and corporate aspect of generative AI and these huge corporations. And it's a lot of things that students may not be aware of. And these are additional guiding ideas that I feel are going to keep us on track as we develop this module. You know, keeping those SLOs in mind that SUNY is introducing, or we've created SLOs rather that address the SUNY GE changes, and I feel that they can loosely map to the ACRL framework. Our focus is really going to be on generative AI, I think, because these are those tools that are knowledge producers or masquerade often as knowledge producers. So ChatGPT and Gemini and Google AI Overview, AI Assistant, chatbots, and that kind of thing. Really reemphasize that AI literacy falls under the InfoLit umbrella. It is part of that. We're not going to abandon the traditional instruction and really good work that we're doing there. This is just a piece of that. I think it's really important to bring up and emphasize kind of the reality of AI and its impact. I think it is really easy to get caught up in these extreme narratives between like doom and hype. Like we see these narratives of AI is going to, you know, take over everything. We're all going to lose our jobs. Like it's going to become sentient. It's tricking people. It's lying to people. There's these kind of extreme doom narratives. And then there's the extreme hype narratives, like the utopianism of this is the best thing ever. It's going to change everything. It's going to make all our lives easier. And we won't be able to live without it. And I feel that those sort of extreme narratives are really narratives of distraction. And it's easy to get caught up in those. And then we kind of often lose sight of the real impact, like the real impact that students will understand, whether it's privacy issues, environmental issues, the huge labor issues, or as I've seen with the art students, like the creative issues, what this is doing to creative fields and art in general. Again, this is a real opportunity to emphasize those systems of power that surround AI and the human element that often isn't addressed. I feel like it's often treated and talked about as a miraculous technology, and there's this black box aspect to it. And I think that black box aspect of it ties into the corporate aspect, where there are things that are not widely talked about, how it works, and kind of breaking that down for students so that they have a better understanding of how these things are built, how they're developed, and how they're grown is really important. Really, I think we would just love to create more informed users and empower them to make their own decisions. Like it is going to be a very critical approach to this content, but it's not telling them don't use it or teaching them how to use it. It is more, this is the impact of using it. These are all of the issues surrounding it. So it ideally allows them to align their values and ethics with usage, depending on how they feel after navigating the module. It should not be overwhelming. Ideally, it should be like maybe an hour, hour and a half. I don't want it to be too big, but that does open the door for a second level scaffolding. Some component of in-person instruction, though I'm not sure what that will look like right now, because I do not want this to be focused on prompt engineering and being an advocate for use or teaching them necessarily how to use it just because it's out there. So whatever the next level may be eventually, I'm unsure of that at this point. So in terms of like the structure that we're thinking about, again, nothing too overwhelming, and this will be similar to the other modules that we have that will be a mix of like text, videos, and interactive kind of assessment components. AI basics, just really allowing students to understand these and define these terms that they're going to hear over and over and over. Generative AI, large language models, machine learning, things like that, that we're hearing over and over and over, students as well, but they may not have an understanding of those. And really being able to differentiate between generative AI and traditional search engines at this point, because it's being very conflated, it's confusing, and especially with the introduction of Google's AI overview and AI assistant, it's just becoming more tricky. And we've had questions at our reference desk. Why can't I use ChatGPT? My instructor says I can't use ChatGPT, but I can use Google as a search engine. So really breaking that down a little bit better. And I'm sympathetic and totally understanding to that because it is deceptive at times. think just how it works. Students should be able to have an understanding of how it is built and how it is grown and what engaging with it does, like how that contributes to growth, what putting your personal information into it does to contribute to growth, your creative works, things like that, or even your essays or your resume, like what is happening to that information. I think also just really, I'm going to go back to hype a little bit, but being able to recognize the difference between what it supposedly can do, these like huge promises of what it can do, and often presented as something infallible, uh, and really what the limitations are, that it can make mistakes, that it can create confabulations and hallucinations and false citations, and that there is a need to understand that it is limited. Ethical components are really kind of the biggest piece of this for me, because I think those ethical components address the critical aspect really well. The environmental aspect, I think, will resonate with a lot of students. There is a global impact, of course, to the establishment of these data centers and water usage, but there's also that local impact, and maybe hearing stories about how this has affected people's drinking water, how it has affected the cost of electricity now, and how these data centers or bigger companies are often kind of making deals for um, electricity that impact just everyday citizens and their electrical prices. Really, again, being able to critique the relationship between AI and copyrighted or personal data, thinking about how some of these tools have consumed large amounts of copyrighted data without permission, what that means to creative people or copyright holders, as well as personal data. Again, what it means to put in your resume, your transcript, or whatever students are feeding into this, medical records, essays, just creative writing, creative art, anything like that, and what that means. And that paid and unpaid labor aspect is really important to me to address. It kind of ties back to how this stuff is built. And is there an element of um, exploitative labor that has gone into building this? Have people been taken advantage of or worked for low wages? And they have. Have they been traumatized during this process, given what they've had to see? And yeah, they have seen some very difficult things. And there is that unpaid labor. So if you're using this and putting your content into it and interacting with it, are you contributing to its growth without being compensated? The evaluation aspect piece is also part of the GE changes. And I think just being able to understand how these models may generate bias content, and that may come from training data, or it may come from that people-pleasing aspect that certain chatbots have, where they want to satisfy your query and give you a answer that it thinks you want to hear. So how does that create kind of a biased response, as well as confabulations or hallucinations? And really taking some aspects of fact checking and looking at those outputs and applying those fact checking skills to the outputs. Like, are these citations legitimate? Are the claims it's making legitimate? So potentially taking pieces of the SIFT method and taking it one step further to see that if you're going to use this content, like, is it giving you accurate information that you're then going to use in your essays as well? For assessment options, there will be a short quiz that covers the major components. And then I think a great idea is to include reflective prompts at the end of each subsection to get students to think about the content they're kind of interacting with and learning and ingesting, and what they feel about it, what they think about it, how it may apply to their personal information use. The reflective prompts can then be compiled as an optional assignment, which the instructor could use if they choose to. Not sure if we're going to include it, but there's also the idea to include an article that addresses some aspect about AI, potentially like hype, and then have students reflect on that as well. So this will be imported into classes like English 101, and then instructors will have the opportunity or option to use which assessment tools they want. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate your time and attention.